According to recent reports, the UK rental market is in a state of crisis, with soaring prices and a shortage of affordable housing options. And due to this rental crisis, younger generations are having difficulty finding a place to call home, and many are being forced to live in inadequate conditions or pay outrageous rent prices. In fact, according to a recent report by the Resolution Foundation, the millennial generation is the first in modern history to be worse off than their parents. And this raises the question, how did we get here? How did the UK housing market become a total mess, and why it's time to hold landlords accountable for the rental crisis and what can be done to address the housing problem? So let's get started.
If you're a renter, you may have noticed that right now it feels harder than ever to find a home.
Britain has a shortfall of over 4 million homes, the worst record in Europe, and pressure is growing to build in England's rolling countryside where for decades construction has been outlawed.
Everyone wants a decent place to live and one that doesn't eat up all their income. But a home you can afford seems increasingly hard to find. Mortgage payments are rising for millions as people come off fixed deals. Rents are going up too. Properties for rent snapped up within minutes, and social housing lists that can be as long as a decade.
The UK rental market has been a hot topic for years, with millennials and Generation Z struggling to find affordable housing. While some blame the baby boomer generation for driving up housing costs, there is another issue at play, the lack of accountability for landlords. But before going into the details, let's take a look at some facts and figures. Private rents in the United Kingdom had risen by 4.4% as of January 2023, which is in fact the biggest increase since official records began in 2016. And around 4.4 million households use the privately rented sector in England, alongside 340,000 in Scotland and just over 200,000 in Wales. But it's not just the private rental sector that has seen rent rises. Tenants in social housing saw their rents rise by 7% as of April 2023. And while the headlines usually focus on the crisis in London, trust me, it's happening in other cities across the country as well. This table right here shows the average rental price hike between February 2022 and 2023 per region. The highest rises were seen in England, followed by North West and Yorkshire. As a matter of fact, according to the charity Shelter, 1 in every 7 tenants in the UK experienced a rent increase in the previous month. That equates to over 1.1 million people. Some cities in the United Kingdom are even experiencing bidding wars, with an estimated 13 people lining up for every available property. So it's safe to say that the things have gone a bit wild. Now, coming back to the factors causing the rental crisis in the United Kingdom, first let's talk about the baby boomer generation. Born between 1946 and 1964, they have been blamed for driving up housing costs because this generation has aged and they have increased their investment in real estate. They have invested in buy-to-let properties, which has contributed to the increase in the number of rental properties available. However, this has also caused house prices to skyrocket, making it increasingly difficult for younger generations to enter the property market. In cities like London, already notorious for a savagely competitive rental market, the number of available properties has decreased by as much as 50%. At the same time, tenants' rents have increased by an average of 17%. Another factor is demographic shifts. The baby boomer generation is now entering the retirement phase, and there are more elderly people in the UK than ever before. As the population ages, there is an increasing demand for rental properties from older people who are downsizing or cannot afford to buy a home. This has further squeezed the rental market and made it more difficult for younger generations to find affordable housing options. And if we look at it from an economic perspective, the rental crisis in the UK is, at its core, a result of supply and demand imbalances. There is a shortage of rental properties in many parts of the UK, particularly in urban areas where demand is highest. And this has driven up prices and made it more difficult for people to find affordable accommodation, right? In fact, in November 2022, more than 500 people applied to rent a one-bed flat in central Glasgow within hours of being listed by estate agents. And according to the Times, it was leased just hours after the first viewing, after tenants put in offers hundreds of pounds over the asking price of £895 a month. Now, let's dig into the other side of the story. One of the main issues with the UK rental market is the lack of rent control. Landlords can charge whatever they like for their properties, leading to rising rents and an increasing number of people unable to afford rent. Rent control is a strategy that limits the landlords to increase the rent up to a certain percentage each year so that the rents don't go beyond what is reasonable. And this strategy has been adopted successfully in other countries such as Germany and Sweden, while in the UK, landlords have been able to charge higher rents, knowing that younger generations have limited options and are often forced to pay more than they can afford. A survey of 2,000 adults in the UK found that 49% are worried that they won't be able to pay their rent in 2023. Given that Londoners, for example, already spend an average of 40% of their income on rent alone, it's hardly surprising. Then there is a lack of accountability. Many landlords were able to get away with providing substandard living conditions or failing to address issues such as maintenance problems, dampness or mold, or pest infestations. This has led to an increase in the number of people living in substandard or overcrowded conditions or even homelessness. Of course, the dark but the very real side to all of this is the possibility of homelessness, with over 270,000 individuals in the UK currently on the streets or at risk of losing their homes. The UK government currently has no policy on the raising of private rents, little to no protection for tenants, and has also failed to clamp down on the poor quality of many properties out there. And lastly, we have a less talked about factor, which is the Airbnb effect. The rise of short-term lets through platforms such as Airbnb has reduced the availability of rental properties for long-term renters. Landlords are often able to make more money through short-term rentals, which has led to a reduction in available rental properties for those who need long-term accommodation. So, what could be done? Well, at first, the government can increase its investment in social housing to provide affordable accommodation for low-income households. Secondly, implementing rent controls could prevent excessive rent increases and provide greater stability for tenants. Strengthening tenant protections, such as providing greater security of tenure and improving housing standards, would also help to improve conditions for renters. Furthermore, alternative housing models such as cooperatives or community land trusts may offer more sustainable and affordable housing solutions for low-income households. And so, it's time for the UK government to take actions to address this problem and to ensure that everyone has access to safe, decent and affordable housing. If we do not act now, we have a risk of creating a society where only the wealthy can afford to own a home, while the rest of us are left to struggle with rising rent prices and substandard living conditions. It's time to put the needs of the many ahead of the greed of the few and create a fairer, more just society for all. Thank you for watching this video on the UK rental crisis. We hope that it has shed some light on this important issue, and if you found this content helpful, please consider subscribing to our channel and following us for more updates on related topics. Happy learning!